Picked apart. The death of a galactic civilization. Selection 1. Physical intercourse robots. Fun stuff. With all the sci-fis that hinge on extinct interstellar races, it is really more of a fantasy trope than a sci-fi trope. When nothing is explained, that's fantasy. When at least something is tried to be explained, that's sci-fi when it comes down to it. Somehow, these authors posit that perhaps the civilization was at one time competent, but eventually shortcomings caught up to them. Or perhaps the writer was no good and just wanted to promote the good guy always wins paradigm. And of course, with anything, there is the too big to fail philosophy. With any spacefaring civilization, outpost on far-flung worlds means that there really would be no way to kill them off completely. Or perhaps size means that no real self-destruction is possible, so they would have to be conquered, and still, that's not really the death of a civilization. But what if there were legitimate reasons that spacefarers failed? This episode posits that one reason could be sex robots, and wonders why Futurama never explored this. Break for intro. Now, I'm not suggesting this hypothetical race fornicated itself into oblivion, or that these overstimulated objects of desire revolted against their horny overlords. That would actually be a tech revolt and a far different scenario and episode. This scenario is thus: in a situation where real relations are no longer necessary to have a fulfilled life, peer-to-peer or normal relations would fall by the wayside, and so there would be no longer any active breeding occurring, and even inactive or accidental pregnancies would no longer be of concern. Having options is not a bad thing. The positives of having these kind of robots would be that overly active individuals could use these as tools to blow off steam and fit into normal life so that innocent bystanders would no longer feel the burn. And of course, this would lead to better control of diseases and unwanted pregnancies. But with anything useful, there are limits. Some find it hard to separate emotions from actions, especially where libido is concerned. As the rise of these tension relievers makes it common to have bona fide relations with machines, it would really make it difficult to have a relationship with an organic. After all, these bots could have whatever kinky fetishes their users could desire or even wind up with after a time, because, let's face it, when you're overstimulated, things get weird. After that, hooking up with an organic that has needs of her own could get way too complicated, turning robo-relations into the norm. Well, that's weird. Let me be clear. I encourage all women and people in general to pursue their life's work with as much gusto as they can. What this is simply an unbiased inference based on observed actions of the masses. If there's no longer a fear of unwanted pregnancies getting in the way of her career, and a woman's needs would also, of course, be able to be taken care of by gigolo bots, women could have a far easier time entering into and maintaining a satisfying career of her own. So, less babies could hypothetically be brought into the world. After all, raising kids is messy and expensive and critically taxes the bodies of the women involved. And of course, maybe not having a kid could increase a woman's lifespan. Taking all that effort into making another of the species and turning it into herself, they could hypothetically live longer than men, and we'd all be doomed. It is suggested in a film called Idiocracy that when people put such things off as having a family indefinitely, they do, much to the detriment of society. I mean, after all, the reduction and of the strain of finite resources would appear to, at first, be a blessing. After all, the death by overpopulation is a painful demise, slow and really bad. Reproduction could start to be seen as unnecessary, unsanitary, disgusting, and no one really wants that. Not to mention, women being free of the burden of childbirth and rearing could balk at any measure to force them to pause or stop their now satisfying careers. Again, there are many issues with gender inequality that this presentation cannot and won't even try to address. This is simply a hypothetical if-then what-could-happen situation. I make no claim to understand the motives of women, or really couples for that matter. Each person, couple, group involved in any situation has to judge their own pros and cons and make a decision beneficial to all. All inequalities have to be addressed in the proper forms at the proper time, and this is not the place to have such a discussion. This presentation is for the purposes of entertainment and engaging critical thinking, nothing more. When it finally hits the fan, actions would have to be taken and hope that it's not too late to fix things. But if it is too late, well, we would have to do something extra. But we can't guarantee cloning. Even if we could, we would still need a vessel to bring the fetus into maturity. And artificially, we can't do it, so we would have to implant it in volunteers. And there may not be enough volunteers. So there would be dystopian orders to breed. After the freedom like presented above, many women may balk at any hint of forcing them to ruin their bodies. The war that could result would be quick. Any attrition would take its toll far too quickly. After all, there's no babies being born. And war takes away from any breeding time, obviously. Stress would also reduce the fertility rate, and the reduction of staff and increase in any tempo involved in a war such as this would increase the stress levels logarithmically. The machines may survive, the structures would last for a bit, but the civ that built them would be gone. Granted, it would all depend on the speed of change, how many realized it, and when it was noticed, but we know that cigarettes cause cancer, sugary drinks cause a whole host of health problems, and both are still consumed with gusto. I mean, after all, how overtly negative could having sex with a robot designed to take like a man be? These robots wouldn't even need to be evil to kill us all. And that is just one scenario. If you want to see more picked apart, or you have an idea that could also kill off a galactic civilization, or want me to rant on any other sci-fi topic, comment below, like, subscribe, and share. You may also be interested in the following presentations.